So I figured for this week's blog, I wanted to just go over the simple introduction to Vue. Just a few of the parameters within it, how to use it. And in this scene, I'm just using the default file that comes up in Vue, and we'll just talk over a few elements. So you can see here, it's kind of like Maya. You've got four viewports, uh, top view, side view, and front view, and your main camera view. You'll get a little indicator right here of what your rendered image will look like. And then you have an outliner basically on the bottom right. That has your camera, sun, and then the various terrains that are basically imported into the scene. And when you click through them, you can see this is your material for that object. If I click to the camera, this changes. So this is kind of like your attribute editor and your channel editor in Maya. So if we have the camera, right now you can see we have a 21mm camera. I wouldn't trust this 100%. You'll see, I may not do it today, but when we bring in a camera from Maya, the millimeter doesn't match up. It's a little bit of a, I don't want to say a hack, but it's not true to what you would get for a camera in Maya. So next tab, you can see the positional data, and you just click between here to get all the different rotation, yaw, pitch. That's the other thing that's interesting in Vue. Eon Vue is a French program. So right here, orientation, you got yaw, pitch, roll. It's a little bit different than what you're used to in other packages. And then here you've got the main camera about motion paths, animation paths, and light linking and stuff like that. Which that's how you get in a synced camera that we can talk about on another time. But basically what's great is you can see here in this render window, you get a little bit of a live feed. You can, drag it over to get a little bit more real estate. You can also drag this down and get a little bit more to make it just slightly bigger. And then down here, this is actually the main camera view, so you can actually orbit around. You can roll. Here we go. So the sun's now more into the scene. You can roll back. Anything like that. So it's pretty cool. And then you can do the same thing here. I'm right clicking to orbit, middle mouse to zoom, and then left click doesn't really do anything in this window right now. Okay, so right now you can see the sun is really blowing out. Uh, okay, so left-hand dialog are a lot of just basic quick keys for a lot of things. This basically creates a water plane. And if you left hold, you can see a drop down. So if there's this little arrow, you'll know that there's more elements within it. These are your generic primitives. So left, you can create a sphere or anything you want for simple primitives. You can create text next in the next tab. These are your terrains. If you left click hold, there's a standard height field terrain, procedural terrain, and then loading procedural terrains. Next icon is plant species. So left click loads a plant, right click, well, left click will just place a plant. So you just have whatever you want within the library. You'll quickly see a cornucopia little sign. So let me go. Oh, right here in the newer version, I've clicked to not show the cornucopia library pieces. See right here, there's a little swirl. If I turn this back, you will only, right now see the swirl, it's on, so this is only the cornucopia files. In addition, with that, and then basically none, so that basically this is what comes with Vue. So if you have that cornucopia unchecked, it's things that you have to buy. So it's up to you if you want it. So plant species, I'm gonna X out, rock species, add cloud layers, planetoids, whole host of things. I won't get into too much, but over here in the render, you can right click. Right now you see that if we render, it's going to be final quality. You can click to preview. You can change the render destination. So if you render in main view, it's going to render in this window. I don't like doing that, so I'll typically render to screen and it'll give you a pop-up window. And then when you're ready to render your final image, you can render off screen and you can click in here to get different options for your file. Down below, there's extra things that you can do to do a multi-layered PSD and things like that. We'll talk about that later. And then here is basically the size that you can select for your image. Now it gives you approximation sizes that it amps up the scene, or you can basically just put in the exact size that you want with this other. Now you see here, there's this little tab, Add Information Strip. I always turn this off, and you'll see what it does. Let's just do a quick render. So it's finishing up. Gamma correction's been applied. Then you have this post-process. I usually turn off auto exposure. I don't want it to give like an extra post-process filtering. So click OK, and see now it's no longer uber bright. You have a little bit of a sun that's hot. But what you can see down here, see this little strip? It's giving you information on the scene that you rendered, which, can be nice, but what's bad is it's embedded in the photo, so the rendered image. So when you open this up in Photoshop, you're going to have this little bar adding size to your image. So even though I'm going to right click on the render tab, so even though you said 679 by 553, it's added that little bit of extra data to it, so a little bit of height. So now if you render, finishes, click OK, it remembers what we had before. Huh. Should have remembered having it there, so maybe because I turned that off, it didn't. Usually it embeds it, and you can see the difference between the two. So I can check on that. Okay, so Vue is very user-friendly. What's really nice about that, so you have a sun, it's dynamic. So if you go into any of these scene files and start lowering your sun, look what happens immediately. It basically mimics sunrise and sunset depending on the atmosphere that you have in your scene file. So if we rise it up, you get a little bit of interaction right here. See this? And then a little bit higher. And then just by going through there, you see that color shift, that value shift that we talked about when doing sunset, sunrise, and daytime. And then if you go full noon, see that you get a much whiter, brighter light because the sun is going through less atmosphere, and then you'll get sharper shadows. So this is very, it's a stylized render because it doesn't get photo real, but it does a pretty good job. So that's what's great. It's dynamic. You can move the sun in any area, and if you notice, let me zoom out. So if we move the sun, look at the angle of it. It's moving around the piece like the sun would orbit the Earth right now. So it's just moving across. Look at that nice kind of dusk setting. Now if you just raise it slightly, you get a little bit more of light glow. And then you raise it a lot more, and then all of a sudden you see the color temperature change on you. Let's go a little further. Lower that down. Same idea. So it can be very interactive. I like using Vue a lot for quick studies, just to see what the light will do over your object, and I find that that's really, really useful. Um, okay, so you've got these terrains, and these terrains you can basically move any which way that you want. You can scale them like that. You can see that guy in the distance, and Vue is really good. You get a sense of the distance in the scene. It's already adding a layer of haze and fog. And how is it doing that? It basically has its own atmosphere editor. So you can load an atmosphere, you can save an atmosphere, add cloud layers, add snow and rain. It's a little hokey. And then here's the actual editor itself. So F4 loads the atmosphere editor, and F5, opens the atmosphere editor, and F5 opens up preset atmospheres that you can toggle in between. So if you see right here, when we open up the atmosphere editor, you have these whole host of tabs. And what's great is, here's your sun, right? You can put a real world position and say what time and what day of the year that the sun would be. Let's do 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. And you can see things starting to happen over here. And then even location, you can feed in where you want it in the world, and it should update. See, the sun just moved below because I think I clicked Russia. Now this might take a second. See, sometimes it doesn't log in. So F4, uncheck, and I'm going to do custom. And what's great here is you've got a zenith, which you can see is basically the rotational value of the sun. And then you've got pitch, which is the height, the angle of the sun in the air. So right now, the sun is almost 15 degrees coming off of the horizon. And then if we go right here, the sun is basically 180 degrees away from center. And then now we're 45 degrees. So you really have some nice, easy ways to move the sun around in your scene. You can increase the size of the sun, so make it larger. You can increase the size of the corona, which is the glow that comes out of the sun. You can lower it so there's hardly any, so it's more of a strong sun. And if you render, you'll see this a little bit more. Click OK. Click OK. So see, there's a real more tack sharp sun happening in the scene. But look at this, it's like this nice fade off of the atmosphere of the sun hitting your distant mountains and going into the distance. So there's some pretty fun stuff that you get for free in Vue. Let's go back to F4. So that's the sun. The light, this is kind of like the rendering engine. The best one that you want to use is global radiosity for everything. And then you can mess with these different tabs. I won't get into them too much, but there's a little bit of changing of different things in here to get a more optimal effect or to alter the render. Clouds are what come in your scene. So right now this scene has no clouds, so you can add a cloud, and there's a cloud library. The spectral clouds are some of the better ones because they're more volumetric. And you can see here I just click small cumulus, the scale, and then you have all these sliders. So you can totally just mess with this, and it's very user friendly. And then if we click render, it takes a little bit longer once you add clouds in. But what's great, click OK, click OK, go between the two. This is what we had, this is not what we have for clouds. They're a little noisy and you can fix that, but they're in the right perspective. So these clouds, and look at the glow, the fill happening and the shadow. You can get a lot for free. And what I like for this is I might do a quick, and look at this edge light around and then this halation over the clouds over the horizon. Is you may not get a final looking cloud out of this, but you'll get something that's actually lit correctly in perspective, casting shadows that you can work from when you render, and you can separate this element when you do a multi-layered PSD. So it really gives you control, and it really gives you the chance to concept relatively quickly. So right here is the height. So if we lower the height, these clouds go lower to the horizon. If we raise it up, the clouds go larger. Altitude, same idea, lower, higher. Density, less. Coverage, more in the sky. All these different things, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. Now, sky fog, haze. This is basically what's making up your atmosphere. So basically, the sky is basically the sky gradient, and how high, and the decay is basically down here. When you go lower, like we talk about for sunset, sunrise, there's more particulates in the air, and you're basically saying how much particulates is actually in the air. Now, see, that's a big jump, but basically, like we said, that happens at sunset when there's more particulates in the air. When the sun passes over, it illuminates more. And see how this is giving this a more sunsetty feel? It's because we've said the particulates are almost to 100. It's 67. If we go all the way, see, it's like a Martian sky almost. It's pure red, or sci-fi Martian. And if we lower it back down, then we get a cleaner, brighter. And if we go all the way to the bottom, see here, there's no more particulates. We're saying it's a pristine horizon, which you probably don't want. You usually want a little bit of particulates. And the same thing, now this is fog and haze, so these are a little bit more natural elements. See here, we've gotten more of a bloom. So I would just say mess with this. Usually for fog, I kind of keep it low, unless for a very stylistic reason I need it, and then just start messing with it. Now you can see the different heights. This is kilometers, 8 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 1.2 meters, no, kilometers here. But now we're in meters, so this is much, much lower. But you can see if I raise it all the way up, see now it's covered over everything. So everything in Vue is about the sliders, but look at that. That gives kind of a cool look. So some of these things you can mess with and break to get a very interesting look. You can turn on and off God rays if your scene will render with it, depending on the position of the sun. Wind I don't really care about. I usually disable. You don't really need it. And then rain and snow and effects. So the sun, the light, the clouds, and the sky fog and haze are the big ones that you want to use in your atmosphere. And I would say before you even get to building your scene too much, get used to that and mess with that. And then basically now you can load, this is the F5. Here are all the presets. And you just keep clicking and you've got these already built scene files that you can just click, and you've got this in there now. Now your terrain stayed the same, you just swapped out the atmosphere. And now if you look, there's these clouds, thick cumulus layer. The light is now an ambient occlusion, so you can change it to global radiosity. And then the sun position has changed as well. So it's really worth just messing with and having fun with it. Double click the sunlight. You can enable lens flare. I usually don't. And then something you want to do here is the shadows. This is the shadow density. And then the softness, quality, faster, better. Use shadow map. Things like that. You can basically lessen so there's a little bit of light coming into the shadows. Click OK. The sun itself, the softness of the sun quality. Usually you want some softening of the shadow so it's not tack sharp. So you can keep it at 0.5 or like a 1 or a 2. And then just do test renders and see if you like how it looks. You can load geometry, so you can do File, Import, Object, and bring in any OBJs. Only OBJs kind of come in here and mess around with it. So very brief overview. Maybe I'll go over this a little bit more in another week if you guys like it. But this is just a real dirty, down dirty, kind of quick intro to Vue. But a lot of times I like the Vue render engine, so I'll import my cameras and I'll import my geometry and do test renders in here. And like I said earlier, like it's just so nice to move the sun around in this scene file, and then you render, and it's like, oh my God, I got a great visualization tool. I kind of call this an underpainting generator. And it's great, so it's not dealing with a more complex program like, let's say, in Maya, where you can really just simply look at and artistically move things around.